Okay, I think I've got everything switched on. I am kind of winging this as I go, so I'm trying to figure this out. Hopefully, we'll have some of you join me very soon. So I've had several questions actually. I did actually post a Q&A a bit too far in advance. So good to see some people joining me here. So we've got Jamie on there. Let's try this wave thing out. Just trying this stuff out. So yeah, I'm trying to figure out this whole Instagram thing with the live. I'm going to try and share some images and stuff as well. We'll see if that works. Like I said, what I did do is I did mistakenly share the ask me a question way too early. I didn't realize it wouldn't hang around. So some of you guys that asked me questions at the start of the week, I can't actually pull them up live on this particular live chat. But what I did do is I took a screenshot. So I've got some images I can drop in. So I'm still going to try and answer your questions if I can get this to work. And anybody else who's also asking questions, I'll try and do that live as well. So I believe, I'm not sure how this looks at your end, so I'm still figuring this out, but I believe there's a question button that you can probably hit live on this as well. So hopefully that's gonna work for you. That's gonna be coming up. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna give it a minute or so just to make sure everyone can join. And let me just see if I can share something by way of a test. So one of the questions I actually got, by email, let me just see. So hopefully, let's just see if everyone can see that. So that was a question I got by email. So the question is, why don't you buy a toupee? And it's a good question. And that's really my answer to that one, because that's exactly how I'm going to look if I'm wearing a toupee. So that's not going to happen. And I really don't like the whole cover-up conspiracy thing as well. So let me just see if I can take that off again now. So that's my way of experimenting with the images. Oh yeah, and I'll come back again. Hopefully that's all looking right for everybody else as well. So what I'm going to do, we've been a couple of minutes here now. So my intention is to go for 30 minutes. We'll try and keep it to that. And if this works, if it's a format that works for everybody, then I'll try and do this regularly each week. So let me see if I can just find, I'm scrolling through here. So I thought I'd start with a good question. Here's Jason there. Nice touched on. Thank you, mate. So this is a good opening question. I thought this would get in your get your interest. So does masturbation or sex before a fight negatively affect performance? I've actually been asked this before. I did a seminar for Niall Molloy in Dublin, and at the Bridgestone gym as it was then. It's now Origins. But yeah, one of his fighters asked this as well. And it's something I've thought about as well. And actually it doesn't affect anything. So I did actually look at the research some time ago as well, just to make sure. And basically, as long as it's no closer than 2 hours beforehand, there's absolutely no adverse effect on your fitness, on your performance or anything. And in fact, it might actually relax you and enhance your performance. So as long as you're not doing some sort of 50 Shades of Grey and smashing yourself up, that's going to affect your performance, or some sort of supporting your partner and loading up your legs that way. Otherwise, all good. Literally crack on. So that's the first question there. And let me just see if I can get this next one. Does this come up? So there's several questions here. So the first one is there. When you have block periodization, I've actually obscured it with my own head. I don't think I can move that. The first block is strength training. Yes, that's correct. So if you're doing block periodization, you're looking to move progressively through the qualities that you train and build the foundation qualities that enhance the next one that you build. So actually, I've got another screen. Let me just, while I'm talking about this, if I can put that one up. So maximal strength is something you start off with, and you build your ability to create maximum force. that's kind of the foundation quality of power, of speed, of stability, of everything that you're going to use in your actual Muay Thai performance. So you need that foundation quality first. If you haven't got sufficient strength, you haven't got the ability to generate enough force, then you can't generate that force quickly. And that's where the rest of this work comes in. So I'm just looking at what fits on the screen there. So we've got that curve, and at the sort of the slow end of the curve is maximal strength, where you've got slow velocity and you've got maximum speed. That's your strength work. And that is all the lifts like, it's the foundation strength lifts like deadlifts, like squats, bench press, chin ups, all that kind of stuff. And then the spectrum at the other end, the fast end of the curve that we're training, that's all your explosive plyometric work. So that's all the bounds and the jumps, and actually light medicine ball work and stuff like that as well. We've got the reaction drills and all that kind of stuff. And the span in between the two, where we take force that you can produce and turn it into something that's usable for us being fighters, with striking in the ring, then we need to convert that with exercises that convert your maximum force through power on this curve, which runs from strength speed through to speed strength. It just means it gets lighter and faster, and then ultimately to maximum speed, where you're completely unloaded and you're moving as fast as you can. But strength doesn't convert naturally through into something that you'll see as speed unless you work exercises throughout that continuum. So we do have block training where we start with strength, but the progress that I recommend there, or the periodization that I recommend for fighters, is actually to use a conjugate or a concurrent system. So although we're focusing predominantly on strength, we're actually working elements of power and speed at the same time. So the analogy I use is like plate spinning. So we're getting the strength plate spinning as fast as possible, but we need to make sure that we're not letting the power and the speed plates drop off, wobble and fall. So while we're building maximum strength, we're still keeping our hand in on power right through into speed. So yes, we do, if I go back to that question there, we do start with strength, but it's a predominantly strength block. There are still elements of power and speed in there if you're training as a fighter. That would be my recommendation there. It's just the ratios are a lot smaller. And the next part of that question there is in the strength block, how many exercises do you have primarily for strength? So in a strength block, and through most of the blocks actually, until I get towards right at the end of a fight camp where we've gone from strength through power into speed, once we get to speed, I drop the number of strength exercises down. But through strength and the power block, I have a consistent level of exercises. So if I just share that one, hopefully you can see that. So the exercises that I use one exercise for each of the major movement patterns. That would be my recommendation. So you're not doing more work than you need to, and you're just overloading those adequately to get the response that you want. In a strength block, that's predominantly strength. So we want a hip dominant lift and a knee dominant lift. So the examples I've got there are something like a front squat for a knee dominant lift for the lower body, and the hip dominant would be a deadlift. So there's some examples there, and they're good sort of strength block examples as well. We've then got horizontal pushes and pulls. So a push would be something like a bench press, and then a horizontal pull would be something like a row. And then we've also got a vertical push and a pull. So that would be a shoulder press and something like a chin up. So we've got those two movements going on there. So they're all your sort of main joint actions. And then we've got some core strength and stability that we want. So it's core anti-extension. So it's resisting the extension pattern. And that would be something like an ab wheel rollout, something like that, where you're just bracing and controlling that position, so you're not actually giving out in your spine and going into extension there. You shouldn't be feeling that in your lower back. You should be really gripping at the core, keeping the ribs kind of compressed together. And core anti-rotation, so something like landmine twists where you're resisting the bar or even moving with it. There's lots of different variations of that exercise. But if you've got a key exercise, a good strength exercise for each of those main movement patterns, then that's all we need. Okay, right. So if I just go back, so if I can get that question back up again. So, and how many exercises for power and speed in the strength block. So what I have in there with, so I've explained that I have power exercises and strength exercises, power exercises and speed exercises in a strength block. So what does that kind of look like? How many exercises? Rather than thinking about how many exercises, it's more about what the volume load would be, if we were to use a planning term. So it's what the intensity is, how heavy it is, and how many repetitions and how many sets you're doing. So you're looking to match up those kind of ratios. So I've got another little slide here. I just want to show this. This is all from my Optimal Fight Camp blueprint, this stuff. So you can get hold of this if you want to have a proper look. So the top bit on there, if it's come out at a reasonable size for you, the green pie chart at the top is actually the first block that I'd have people going into, and that's the mobility and movement block. So that's actually cleaning up all the movement patterns. The next one in from that is the functional strength block there. So this is the one we're discussing now. So I don't know if you can see there on that pie chart, but the darker red portion there is strength. So the main volume load, so the main intensity and the sets and the reps all together, most of that all adds up to be mostly strength. We've then got that shade of red in between there, the slightly lighter red, is the representative sort of volume load of power exercises. So that would be actually in a strength block, I try and match the force outputs as well. Although they're quick, I still like them to be maximal force. And something like a jerk press would be a really good choice of a power exercise in a strength block, because it's, of all the power exercises, it's the one that produces the most force. So that marries up with us trying to produce more force in that particular block. And then the last little orange segment there is the amount of speed work that we've got in there. So that would be the sets and reps of plyometrics and med ball work. And you can see how that shifts as we go from left to right there through to a power block, and then finally into a speed block, where you can see actually the orange portion there is now the majority of our pie chart. So a lot of the work that we're doing there is plyometric and its speed. And you can see that the strength has dropped right down. The dark red little segment there has dropped down. That's a small little contribution now just to maintain that quality, because we've already spent our time building up in the blocks that preceded this, and now we're just looking to keep it. And that's where the amount of strength exercises would actually drop down. Okay, I've got to move on. I'm talking too much about one particular question here. So let me just move on there. This one came up as well. I don't know if you can read that one. So while working on improving hip mobility, is it good to stay away from heavier compound movements like the weighted squat while working on this? So yeah, good question. What we've got to think about here, when you're looking at mobility, there are three elements to that. So there's the soft tissue part, there's the muscle itself, where we want to get that nice and pliable to let that move. We would use release exercises to do that. So it'd be self-myofascial release, foam rolling, all that kind of stuff. The tack and stretch is my favorite to fast track that. We then go to work on the joint itself. So rather than the muscle lengthening, we now want the articulation of the joint, the way the bones all come together, that to work as best as possible. And I like using band distractions for that. So we're actually moving the joint, moving the way the bones come into each other. So if that's a joint and the bone comes into it, we're actually pulling it with a band over to one side so we can get more movement than we normally would do without distracting the joint. So actually taking some load and distracting the joint off to one side will fast track that. The last part of actually improving your mobility is to then take the joint range that we've got and the muscle range that we've given it, and now you need to actually get the neuromuscular control, so how the brain sets the software limits on the end stops to control that range of motion. And we do that by loading the joint pretty heavily while working through a full range of motion. So a weighted squat in this example would be a really good choice of a movement if you're going full range and you're not using so much weight that you can't get into full range, so don't overload it. But it'd be a really good example of a neuromuscular anchoring exercise. So if you did some soft tissue release, some band distraction into your hips, and then squatted down with some load, that would help to fast track your mobility. So rather than avoiding it, keep the quality as good as you can, and actually use it in the right sequence, and you'll actually find it will enhance your flexibility. There's lots of research actually on showing how strength training through full range of motion really does enhance mobility. So as long as you're not doing cheaty little rubbish reps and loading too heavily, so you're not going full range that you've got, then it's a good way of working. So let me move on to another one. Try and get through all these questions. Okay. So what's your opinion on Strongfirst and Kettlebells for strength and conditioning in relation to Muay Thai? So, yeah, both good modes of training. Strongfirst, those kind of programs are all about the strength part of that training. So they're going to develop the maximum force, but what they're not going to do is concurrently build power or speed or shift and vary that as it's going through. So Strongfirst is good for building foundation strength, but for a fighter that's actually ultimately looking to move explosively and quickly under body weight effectively, just the weight of your gloves in the ring, it's not the best way to prepare fighters. So if you're more of a power lifter or doing those kind of things, then something like then Strongfirst would work for that. But otherwise, for people training as an athlete and fighters in particular, a bit more of a balanced approach and more of a periodized approach that would peak your performance in time for a fight would be a better option. Kettlebells are a great tool. In my mind, they're the best power endurance tool out there. So if you're looking to develop explosive power and work it with a bit of power endurance, then kettlebells are the tool for the job. They're also a really good implement for exercises like Turkish Get Ups and things like that, which I think is a really, really good exercise. So it's a tool in the toolbox, but I wouldn't limit myself to any one particular implement. I would kind of choose the best tool for the job depending on where I am in a program. So I don't like to be stuck with just one bit of kit. Lots of bits of kit are very versatile, but I'll choose the best tool for the job, and depending on what the ability of the client or the fighter is that I've got, what they work best with. So let me try and get onto another one here. So what is considered too old to have a professional Muay Thai or kickboxing career? That's a really individual thing. So there's lots of people that are sort of over the age of 30 that are still moving really, really well. And actually, if you've got a good strength and conditioning program and you're training well and you're not using a ridiculous amount of volume that's giving you overuse injuries and all this kind of stuff with all your other training, you find you can train to a really good age. I actually still fought pro at the age of 40. I stopped then because I ended up with an elbow injury, bit of bone fragment that I had to have surgery for, and that just stopped me. So I couldn't train productively anymore. But it was only that injury that really stopped me. I was still fit enough. Everything was going okay. So depending on what your injury history is, I would say, 30, 35 even isn't too old. And you could even go beyond that if you're training effectively. I just wanted to show you this actually. So there's a lot of research I'm doing. I mean, I train a lot of people face to face that aren't fighters as well, that are in their 40s, 50s, and even 60s. So I've got a good experience of what works with older clients as well, and what actually serves them best, regardless if they're wanting to compete or not, in everyday life. And one of the things I wanted to point out here, this is a little graph that I've picked. I plotted these results from lots of bits of research. So it's the decline in age-related strength as you age. So between the ages of 20 to 30 is your prime. That's like your 100% potential. That doesn't actually mean you are at your strongest between 20 and 30. It is if you've been training for strength, but if you've not been training for it, it's untapped potential. Between the ages there you've got that between sort of 30 to 50, there's a decline. You'll find you lose a percentage of your maximum strength. And I've got two curves there. The blue line is like the upper limit from research of what we've seen people detrain, and the red line is the lower limit. And these are of athletes training. This isn't just regular people. So you can see there's a natural decline. So if you were performing at your absolute best at 30 years old, you'd expect if you could be doing about sort of 96%, 97% of what you could achieve at 30 at the age of 50, then you're actually doing very, very well. I've actually got lots of clients that have come, that are training with me that are out now in their 50s or even their 60s, and they're stronger than they ever were. And it's just because they didn't tap into their potential when they were 20 or 30. So the curve kind of looks completely skewed, which actually good news. It just means they're offsetting that aging process. But whoever you are, you will lose strength as you age. So we are expecting that. But you can see that, you know, if you're in that sort of 30 to 40 range, if you're training productively in the gym and you're not losing strength at the rate other people are because they're not even doing it properly, then you're in really good shape. It's just really a case of not smashing your body up with overuse. So let me move on to the next part of his question. Let me see if I can find this. So also, can proper strength and conditioning prolong your career extensively? Yes, I kind of answered that in the last one actually. So yeah, if you're working all of those joint actions that I described, and you're balancing up all your pushes and your pulls so the joint strength is equal around the joint, you're moving well, you've got good posture and strength and stability, then you certainly will extend your career. And if you're offsetting that natural decline in strength that you get as you age, then you're effectively performing as a younger person anyway. So yes, you can. Incidentally, that decline in strength is one thing, but what's even more important as you get older is the decline in power. So it's how quickly you can apply your force. So you need to keep that foundation strength, like we discussed earlier, but it's the rate that you apply it that will diminish even more rapidly as you age. So that stuff like the power exercises, the med ball work, and relative plyometrics, I would warn against when you're older doing really aggressive plyometrics, because your tissues are not going to take the intensity quite so well if you're doing like drop jumps and all this kind of stuff. So you have to be really careful on the volume on that. But yes, it absolutely will extend your career there. Let me get another one. So what's your opinion on some IQ mental training like that one from Lomachenko? I'm not familiar with what he's doing there, but yeah, IQ, mental training, very important to a fighter. You know, Vinny Shulman does lots of stuff really specifically for fighters as well. You know, you can really undermine yourself. I mean, I've done it to myself. I've seen fighters that I've coached as well completely mentally ruin themselves on the day when they've got all the ability to do, you know, to actually win the fight, and they just turn themselves off. So if you're not able to, if you haven't got that sort of emotional control and awareness of your mental habits, it completely sabotages you. So there's a lot to be gained from working on the mental side there as well. And I actually encourage that in all the gym sessions as well. So it's how you see people respond when the going gets tough, whether it's in training or in the ring, that habit repeats. So if you kind of, if you're on your sort of high week where everything's pushed to 100%, if you keep kind of doubting yourself and pulling back, that will be something that will be a reoccurring habit that you've got. So do look out for those sort of mental behavioral habits that you have in training as well. Right. I've got to get on to some of these other questions now. So I'm really running out of time. I'm sorry. I'm sort of going through here, but so let's see if this one comes up. Oh, hold on. I'm doing multiple things at once here and I've just messed that up. So I need to get that off. Let me just see if I can turn that off first. Right, there I am, nice and big. Questions. Here we go. So what kind of strength and conditioning approach makes you stand out from other fighters? So I'd say the main thing that a lot of fighters do is they'll do bits and pieces of training, and it's not necessarily cohesively put together into a program that feeds one property and builds into athletic performance that peaks them for a fight. So if you're doing a better job of coordinating what you're doing together, and actually periodizing in a way that converts raw athletic qualities into fight performance as you get towards the fight, both in terms of fitness and in the strength, power and speed qualities, then that's going to make you stand out, because still loads of fighters are really not doing a very good job of that. So let me see if I can get another one up. So what are the biggest mistakes fighters make in strength and conditioning for Muay Thai? Well, that's really just what I said. I think I've answered that one really as well. So a lot of fighters are not really kind of marrying things together that well. So they're doing bits and pieces and then going round in circles. So rather than sort of that progressive step up, taking a little moment to sort of back off a little bit, then stepping up back past where they were and repeating that so that, you know, in a year's time, they're completely different to what they were a year ago. They're kind of stuck in almost like a month loop where they get fit and then detrain again, maybe even 2 months at best. But that tends to happen. A lot of fighters are making their strength and conditioning sessions like Muay Thai sessions. And that's a mistake because then you're not training different qualities. The idea is that you take the strength and conditioning and you train elements that you're not going to touch in your Muay Thai. We want to bring things to the party that are not being solved with Muay Thai. If it can be solved with Muay Thai, train more Muay Thai because it's skill specific and that's going to be the most use to you. But the strength and conditioning should plug the gaps. So that's a mistake that I see. I probably can answer a lot more on that one, but let's just make sure I'm getting through some of these other questions. Here we go. Turkish Get Ups, done for time rather than reps. 20 minutes of alternating sides. Yeah, it depends what you're trying to target with your training. So that would become a real kind of endurance routine, that one. You'd have to load it appropriately, and what I like there, alternating sides. So if you weren't alternating sides, I'd say you're likely to sort of burn out your shoulder. The stability in the rotator cuff there wouldn't really tolerate it for that long. But if you're alternating sides, if you select the rep, the weight, so that you're not going to be losing form too much. Keeping form is the most important thing. So repeating ragged movements is never a good idea. The Turkish Get Up is a real technical pattern actually, and there's lots of habitual stability going on in there. So if you did start repeating jump form, that would start to show up in other movements as well. So bank the habits of good repetitions on that. That'd be my warning with that one, is just to not let it get too ragged. But yeah, no problem otherwise. Let me see what else we've got. I'm just going to pop this one up. So this one's Samir. He's saying, hi Don, wondering if you ever recommend sprint interval of less than 2 minutes, e.g. 30 to 60 seconds. Little bit of background here. Samir's on my heavy hitters program. I think he's referring to a training method that we have in there, cardiac power intervals. So perhaps I'm really struggling to sort of see all the comments on here as well. If Samir, if you're on here, if you can just confirm if I've got that right there. So with the cardiac power intervals, it's effectively a sprint. You can't sprint for a minute, you're going to slow down, but the intention is to go as hard as you can for that long. That typically is around 60 seconds is where I work that one. You can take that a bit longer as well. The intention of that particular mode of training is its central adaptation of the heart. So what we're looking to do is to get it to pump harder to sustain that power output for longer intervals. And we save that right till close to a fight. So it's not something we overuse away from the fight, that one at all. But it's a flat on sprint. I can see Sam has put the old thumbs up. Thanks, mate. So he's just confirmed that. So yeah, so 60 seconds for a cardiac power interval is perfect because it's long enough. What we're trying to do with cardiac power intervals is to reach maximum heart rate. If you're going for 30 seconds, you're not likely to soak long enough at that intensity to get the heart up that high. So really that 60 seconds is a minimum, really. I wouldn't take that down for the cardiac power intervals. If you're going shorter than that, then that's not the purpose of the training. We're doing other things. And of course, there are lots of sprint intervals you do less than 60 seconds, between 30 to 60 seconds. If you're doing 30 seconds, something I'd warn against or explain, God, I've only got a minute left. I've been rubbish at getting through these. I'll save some of these questions and I'll get back to you on some of these and post some in between, or even save them for next time as well. But what I wanted to just point out, so 30 seconds, let me just see if we're talking 30 seconds on your intervals. That's not what I wanted. Bear with me, folks. let me see. So I've got a graph here or an explanation. I don't think it's going to come up big enough. So, yes, right. So that's the adaptation in the heart that we're going for, if you can see that. So there's different ways the heart can grow effectively. And what we're after is a combination of eccentric hypertrophy, which is growth of the heart, which is where we stretch the volume of the heart. And that's the heart on the bottom there, big old chamber. That's what we want. The lower intensity stuff does that. The thicker heart with the smaller hole in the middle has got concentric hypertrophy. So that's developed as a muscle that contracts harder with each pump. And that's the high intensity stuff. And that's a lot of what the Muay Thai training does as well. Now, cardiac power intervals that Samir was talking about, we're actually going for that concentric hypertrophy. So we're trying to make the muscle of the heart pump harder with each beat. So we don't want a bigger volume of blood. We've already worked that with the gentler work that we've done further away from the fight. As we get closer to the fight, we want to develop the power of the heart and that it can sustain that power for longer, which is why we do it for up to a minute. If you're training for 30 seconds, say the heart isn't getting the workout that we're after, then we're actually training it as a muscle. And what you are doing at 30 seconds is we're starting to get into the lactic system. And I don't like too much of that, especially further away from a fight. Closer to a fight, it's okay. But we want to make sure that we don't end up with too much lactic development and we kill off the aerobic system. We want that aerobic system boosting everything up. So I've just checked the time there. What I'm going to do, if everybody's happy, I'm just going to roll on a little bit longer. I'm going to have to get a bit more disciplined with sticking to 30 minutes. But let's just see if I can just answer some more here. If I can pick out some good ones. So, okay, let's have a look here. So, Dr. Karen, I've got, what is your opinion on training punches while holding dumbbells? And this one, using theraband, so resistance bands on punches and kicks. So very quickly, just to finish up with this one, I have actually posted a video on this one. Oh, I've still got that. Oh, I'll leave that there. Still got that heart in the background, haven't I? I'll leave it there. Okay, so yeah. So if you're training punches and kicks with resistance bands, that's not how a strike works. So as you accelerate a punch or a kick, it starts slow and it finishes fastest just before you strike the target. The opposite's true when you actually use a resistance band. So that's the main reason why I don't like that. But it teaches you to focus on the limb itself that you're striking with. So if you're punching or kicking against a band, all your brain is kind of thinking about is your arm extending into that punch or you throwing your leg at the punch. When actually good technique comes from translating all the power from the whole body moving, and then at the last minute, translating all that effective mass is the term, all of that whole kinetic energy and momentum into the striking limb. If you're thinking about the limb too early, that's actually messing up your technique. So bands for that reason isn't very good. And the other thing with kicks in particular, if you watch someone kicking with bands, they're really clumsy. So it actually starts messing up the motor pattern, the fine motor pattern of the technical skill of kicking, which when you take the band away, you kind of see people start falling forwards and things like that. So it messes up all the balance and stuff as well. So if you're not doing too many reps of it, it's okay. If you're doing a lot of repetitions, it starts to kind of teach the body to move in a way that is not actually how the strike is thrown. So it looks very sport specific, but actually it's not. It actually is quite contrary to the way you throw a technique. So I'd much rather people develop power with raw patterns in the gym, with techniques that your body doesn't confuse with the real technique, and develops those raw qualities, and then we transfer that to you striking for real, and then you've got a lot more power to smash out with. So I think I'm going to have to leave it there for now. Thank you for everyone for actually joining me on this one. I'm going to try and save it so we can sort of replay it. And if this has been useful to everybody, then I'll try and do this on a weekly basis, especially during the lockdown anyway. When I've got clients, I might have to move things around a little bit. But I think Friday at 6 o'clock here in the UK is a pretty useful time. So thanks again, everybody, for joining me, and hopefully see you next time. And I'll answer some of the other questions if I can in between now and then as well. So I'll say goodbye for now. Thank you.